What's up, all you cool cats and kittens? Carol Baskins here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel, the new installment of Chris versus the Unknown. Now, I know what you're thinking, Chris. Where the hell have you been? Life happened. Went on a little bit of a hiatus with content creation, besides some TikToks here and there. But we are back, baby, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. We're getting right back on that saddle. And I am super excited to go on this journey with you, with Chris versus the Unknown, where we are going to dissect all of the creepy, spooky, freaky mysteries that keep me up at night. And I hope keep you up at night so we can tackle this together and try to explain the unexplainable. Starting with this first story, which I know you probably have heard of, but I had to do this one because when I first read this story, it was the first time I was truly in fear of what I did not know or understand. And this story perfectly encapsulates how freaky it is to not know what the hell is going on. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here. Please grab your snacks, your drinks, your blankie, and buckle in as we dive into our first story, the Dyatlov Pass incident. Our story begins on January 23rd of 1959. 10 hikers, 8 men and 2 women, boarded a train to Sverdlovsk. Nailed it. In the Soviet Union. Their goal was about a 200-mile trek through the frozen peaks of the Ural Mountains to reach Mount Otorten. There are indigenous people, they're called the Mansi people, that there are local tribes that live in these mountainous regions. They call Mount Otorten, quote, "Don't go there." The group consisted of Igor Dyatlov, the expedition leader, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubanina, Alexander Kelevatov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, Yuri Krevenishenko, Semyon Salatarov, and Yuri Yudin, the only one who would survive due to illness. Now, these hikers would travel by train to a town called Ivdel, taking pictures, journaling the entire time. These guys are super excited. These are 10 hikers. But something I wanted to mention is that these hikers were very experienced hikers. This wasn't their first time doing something like this, being on an expedition that was challenging, or even dangerous. This is something that they thought would be a fun ski expedition to do. Like, this wasn't scary to any of them. They then take a truck to a village called Vizhai. Now, they're going from train to truck, and then later they're going to do hitch a horse and a sled as they get closer to the mountain and as these towns grow, sparse. There's not a lot of people that live near these mountains, and the village of Vizhai was the last settlement before they would continue their journey on foot. On January 28th, Yuri Yudin, the only survivor, would fall ill and have to turn back. They are saddened. Oh, Yuri, he gets to go back. Well, not gets to. He's sad. He can't go on this fun adventure with his friends that they've been planning for and that they are excited for. So he turns back, and the remaining 9 hikers continue by foot into the frozen tundra of the Ural Mountains. Now, during their expedition, right, they are continuing to journal, take pictures. They're seeing sights that they think are pretty. They're taking pictures of that. They're laughing, they're joking, they're having a good time. Of course, they stop and make camp along their trek up this mountain to their main goal is to get to Mount Otorton. There is a village on the other side, which they've already sent correspondence to. Basically, if we're not here by this allotted time period, send help. And of course, there's a little bit of give in the days. So, if they're 3 days late, 5 days late, they're expecting some delays, whether it be weather or they get turned around or the terrain's a little rougher than they thought. Again, all of the safety processes were put into place. These guys had enough gear, enough food. They had a great tent. They had shelter. They had ski poles. They had tons of clothing and food and knives. And these people were so readily equipped to combat what nature had to offer them. They were ready for it. This is not new to them. They've dealt with this before. So they continue on their journey, and some harsh weather comes, and they decide that they need to make rest for the night and set up camp at a place called Kolat Sakil, which translates to the Mountain of the Dead. When I first read this, I was like, guys, what are we doing? Do you want to camp with us? We're going to the Mountain of the Dead. I'd be like, can I get some more information? Like, what is this Mountain of the Dead? Like, what's the vibe, And that's what the Mansi people called it, but contrary to what most believe, the reason why they called it Mountain of the Dead is because the Mansi people found it hard to hunt game in this area. You couldn't get really any food or sustenance in the area, so it's a dead mountain. It's the Mountain of the Dead. You don't go there to hunt because there's nothing lives there. It's a dead mountain, Mountain of the Dead. However, I guess this name would take a new light after the events that will transpire. They settle down for the night. They make their camp. They all get into their warm tent, maybe have some food, and, turn in for the night after an exhausting journey. But, in the morning, they're going to make their last leg over Mount Otorton to their final destination, and mission success. So, good night, everybody. See you in the morning. They were never seen alive again. Now, this is kind of the story that leads up to that moment, of course. And weeks go by, and the people that are awaiting their arrival obviously get very concerned. And once a certain amount of time passed, I think it was like 3 weeks, that's a long time, they decide, oh snap, we need to get some help and find them, get a search party together and go find these hikers. On February 26th, during their search through the Ural Mountains to find these lost hikers, they happen upon their tent. Now, this is where things start to get weird. So they approach the campsite, and of course they see skis kind of sticking up out of the snow, and they see gear, and everything seems to be in order. It's not like things were thrown about. But the one thing that the first question mark or red flag is that they see the tent folded in on itself. They examine it, and they see that there is a large tear across the side of the tent. Now, I know what you're thinking. Bear, mongoose, reindeer, yeti, fox, wolf. baby wolf, or any other hungry animal, maybe slash the tent. They quickly realized that the tent was actually cut from the inside of the tent. So, first off, what the hell? So, the tent was ripped open from the inside. After further examination, they see everyone's shoes and jackets and clothes and gloves and hats and gear and food and knives and everything that they would need to survive out in these elements are still remaining in the tent. And then they scan and see 8 to 9 sets of footprints walking away from the tent down one of the slopes towards a tree line about a mile away. Now, contrary to popular belief, and something I learned, is that everyone was under this notion that there was like ripped, like, distressed snow, as if like these trails were almost moving in a frantic manner, like the hikers ran from the tent. But that wasn't the case. These steps were not only they were barefoot, which is insanity, but they were calm. They were walking in side by side in an orderly manner down these slopes. So, of course, the investigators head down the slopes to investigate further on where these tracks would lead. What they would discover still haunts me to this very day. When they make it to this tree line, this is where the first 5 bodies are found. 2 men, Doroshenko and Krivonishenko, were both found under a cedar tree, stripped down to their underwear, huddled near the remains of a small fire. Now, when I first read this story, I was like, what? They're not wearing any clothes. They're wearing their underwear. It's 30 below freezing. Why are they not properly dressed? Well, that would lead us back to the tent. Well, why did they leave all their gear and clothes and shoes and socks and boots and hats and gloves in the tent? There have been some theories. There is a condition called paradoxical undressing. That was called. Nailed it. Paradoxical undressing is a phenomena observed in individuals experiencing severe hypothermia, where they remove their clothing despite feeling cold. And this is like where you feel like your body temperature is increasing. You feel like you're burning up. And so in an attempt to cool yourself off, you take off your clothes to escape the heat, but in reality, you are freezing to death. Of course, they cannot prove this, but that is one theory. And of course, they were deemed to have died of hypothermia. Now, there are mixed reports that the cedar tree beside them had broken bark and branches going up about 15 feet up the tree. And some mixed reports will say that there is even bark in the nails of the 2 men found and skin in the bark of the cedar tree. When I first read this, the only thing I'm thinking of is 2 things. One, he's climbing the tree, but so frantically that his skin's coming off. Now, of course, we can't prove that this happened or in what manner he was climbing the tree, but all they know is that branches were broken up to 15 feet high. So were they climbing the tree to get away from something? Were they climbing the tree to get better view of something? Or were they just breaking off cedar branches for the fire? After some time, 3 more of the bodies were found nearby. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin were found in the snow between the cedar tree and the tent. Now, this is a mile. Tree line is over here with the cedar tree, tents over here. They were found in between the cedar tree and the tent in almost a frozen crawl facing the tent. Now, I always found it so fascinating, and this is the question I don't think ever gets asked. Everyone always asks, why did they leave the tent? Well, yes, that's the question that we've been wondering for the last 60 years. But my question might be a two-part question. Why did they not return to the tent? So they left the tent. Why didn't they come back? These three bodies that were found heading back towards the tent, they died, unfortunately, heading back to the tent. They died facing down, and some even in crawling positions, crawling back towards the tent. My question when I researched this is, in their last moments, their last ditch effort, they're going all in, they're risking everything. What do they got to lose? Their last option is to head back to the tent. Now, that question is what always kept me up at night. What was it about the campsite that, until they were on death's door, did they decide to go back? What is going on? What? The last four bodies were discovered months later, buried in a ravine under 12 feet of snow in a totally different portion of this forested area. Like way down, it was like either half a mile or a mile down. They were a great distance away, buried side by side in a ravine filled with 12 feet of snow. Besides some minor scratches and bruises, they were all deemed to have died of hypothermia, which, yeah, that makes sense. But these last four would change everything, would flip this entire investigation, this entire story on its head. And again, still scares the poop out of me. So months later, when the snow melted, with the help of the indigenous Mansi people that lived in this mountainous region, if it wasn't for them, they probably wouldn't have found these bodies. The remaining bodies were discovered in the ravine, buried under 12 feet of snow. Now, these four bodies showed much more violent injuries. Nikolai, he had massive skull fractures consistent with an extreme force impact similar to a car crash, but no external wounds, just a couple scratches, maybe a bruise here, but a severely fractured skull. And I was like, that's weird. Maybe he hit his head on a rock. You know, people fall. I don't know what happened, but he's got a fractured skull. They deem he died of hypothermia. Maybe he hit his head really hard before he succumbed to the elements. Then comes Alexander Kolevatov. Now, this guy had severe neck and head trauma. They said that he had a twisted neck and body posture, as if he was twisted or grabbed forcefully. Weird. Again, minor scratches and bruises, but no external scars or cuts or gashes or anything. I mean, the first two bodies sure didn't, and the bodies before that didn't. They might have found some blood around the mouth, things like that. But no like cuts or gashes like maybe a bear got him or something like that. Nothing. So kind of getting weird, but he died of hypothermia. Maybe he fell from a tree or something, twisted his neck, succumbed to the elements. Then comes Semyon Solitarov. Now, this is one of the first hikers that would have severely crushed ribs. He had multiple broken ribs. Again, the medical examiners compare this to the force of a high-speed car crash. The impact of these injuries, they said that it wasn't caused by another human being. It's as if he got into a car accident. That's how severe these injuries were. But again, no cuts, no gashes, just some cuts, some minor bruising, like he went through a thorn bush or something. They received such force and such injuries that they're like, this is a car crash. Probably. This is where things get a little weird. Semyon was the first hiker to not only be found with crushed ribs, but missing eyes. I was like, that's weird. Where are his eyes? Why are his eyes missing? The theories range from natural decomposition, which is an interesting thought, to potentially scavenger animals, which buried under 12 feet of snow, maybe it happened before then. I don't really want to get into the details of a fox or a small scavenger animal eating a dead body, but I feel like there's much more to offer than just the eyes. So, what the hell is going on? Then comes Ludmila Dubanina. Now, for me, this was probably the most disturbing of the nine. Of course, she also had major chest trauma, completely crushed ribs. Her eyes were also missing, but also her tongue was missing as well. A lot of people argue about Ludmila because the medical examiners found that there was like an excess amount of blood in her stomach, which some theorize that the tongue was either cut out, ripped out, or it was out while she was still alive because the blood would enter her stomach. Now, some people, hand wave that, which I mean, the science behind it makes sense, but it's hard to tell. The medical examiner said, oh, it could have been food. It could have been, it's just, again, I don't really want to get into the semantics of whether she was alive or not when her tongue was removed. Her tongue was removed. Where's her tongue? And again, they say, oh, probably scavenger animals, but like, are they not going to eat the rest of the body? Like, I don't get it. Like, scavenger animals can't be you pull out of your pocket when you can't explain why her tongue is missing. What about the rest of their tongues? Did the fox just eat one tongue? Did the wolf just eat one tongue and go, yeah, that's about it, dude. I'm good. I don't want to eat. I was just looking for a snack. I just want a quick snack. Not really hungry. Another interesting note, which a lot of people hand wave as well, but the medical examiners, or at least the investigators, found it important to note. Radiation was picked up on multiple articles of clothing. Now, I've read some stuff doing research on this for as long as I've known this story that, oh, well, everything's naturally radioactive. Everything naturally has radioactivity on it. Okay, but like I never watch listen to crime junkies or watch an unsolved mystery and they go, oh, by the way, her shirt radioactive. Like they don't mention that unless it's a point of contention. Like it's obviously something that was important enough to put into the investigation. Why the hell is their stuff radioactive? And why was it noteworthy enough to put into the investigation? Now I know what you're going to say. It's Russia. Everything's radioactive. Ha ha. Very funny. That was a good one. I'll write that down, actually. After reading all of this, the only question that, you start with is what happened. And you gotta dig deeper. For example, why did they cut the tent? Why did they leave the tent? If they were going to leave the tent, why did they leave all of their gear, belongings, clothing, food, tools, and walk out into the pitch black darkness of negative 30-degree weather in an uninhabited region of dead mountain? Why? Right? And let's just say they all decided that this was a great idea. When they start freezing to death, why do they not return back to the tent? In their final moments, the three that were found between the cedar tree and the tent, they were crawling back. It was their last resort. Why was returning to the tent your last resort? It was either dying of hypothermia and freezing to death or return back to your shelter with all of your food, gear, clothing. Your only means of escape, their skis were up there, their food, their tools. They have jackets and clothing up there. Why? Why did they leave the tent and why didn't they return? There are plenty of theories. Now, before we dive into the theories, a couple things I wanted to mention. I know one of my questions, and a lot of people have asked, why were the Uris, the two men found under the cedar tree, the very first ones to be found, why were they so underdressed? There, of course, are theories, paradoxical undressing, which we discussed. Possibly that makes sense, but their clothing wasn't found near them. The theory I heard about, which I believe in, is that their clothes were removed from them after they had died. Now, I think in these moments, of course, instead of returning back to the tent when they're all freezing to death, I think they found the Uris to both be dead and they said, hey, they don't need them anymore. Let's take what we need. And there's further evidence for this because the hikers that were found in the ravine were found to have either clothes that they were wearing or clothes nearby the ravine that belonged to the first four hikers that were found. So obviously some swaps happened. They took clothes from the dead. And of course, they were not wearing the appropriate clothing or gear for this climate or for this current environment that they're in. Pitch black darkness and negative 30 degrees. Investigators say that this happened, and of course the medical examiners back it up, that this happened in the early hours of the night or in the morning, actually. About 2 to 3 a.m. is when this all went down because they went to bed at about 10 or 11 that night and, of course, ripped open their tent and walked out into the wilderness at about 2 or 3 a.m. Let's get into the theories. Theory number 1, avalanche. I think that is the laziest theory of all. First off, there's no evidence. Now, you had me for a second. Chris, what if an avalanche happened and they tore their tent out to get out? Sure. They found the tent. They found the campground. And if you see in the photos, you can see the skis and multiple other items still standing upright. There wasn't this slab of snow that came down and covered the tent. Just didn't happen. I believe it if it happened, but it didn't. What if I say Cold War? They know, well, it's cold out there during the Cold War because it's like we could do like a double meaning, like with the cold. No, we can cut that. We can just cut it. Burr, Cold War. I think we know a thing or two about the Cold War, right? Because it's cold where they are. Theory number 2, military experiment gone wrong. Now, of course, this is happening 1959, 1960 during the Cold War. So, of course, there was a lot of covert military activities going on, a lot of military testing, a lot of secret military testing. And one of the theories is that the hikers, unfortunately, were victims of a military nuclear experiment, maybe a missile in that mountainous region that they just happened upon. Now, a lot of people like this theory. However, there is just so little evidence of this. There are mixed reports that the Mansi people and other people living in the villages near the mountains said that they did see lights or orbs in the sky before and after the night in question, the night the hikers died, which you could link to missiles or aircraft, something they really couldn't explain. Possibly, but there is when the volunteers, the people that got there and found the tent and the bodies, they were the first ones there. They didn't see any debris, any evidence of an explosion, a crater. There wasn't like pockets of radiation from like a nuclear test. There wasn't anything like that. So nothing pointed towards, a military experiment. But of course, it's the Cold War and everything's gotta be secret. And maybe it was covered up. So maybe, but I'm not buying it. This next theory is really not not a good one. No, infrasound. Infrasound. Some suggest that powerful winds caused sonic disturbances, leading to the hikers to panic and flee. Um, Maybe. I know there's a lot of people trying to like logically explain this. But again, they didn't flee. They didn't run away. Of course, they tore open the tent, so I'm thinking they are acting out of desperation. But how do you go, guys, we got to get the hell out of here, rip? Like, what? They're not walking down this slope. They're sprinting. They're falling over each other, trying to get away from the infrasound. I did research on it. You can look it up yourself. It's a dumb thing and it never happens. I know there's going to be people like, infrasound's real and you need to just accept that. I don't. I think it's right up there with UFO encounter is our next theory. Now, this is a doozy, obviously. A lot of people point towards the floating orbs and lights in the sky. Of course, we all know the last photograph taken by the hikers where this orb, kind of like where this possible light or orb is kind of captured on this last photo that they found in the film. Maybe that one's see that one we can't like really put down because we have to say aliens aren't real. Maybe that's tough because you can't really prove it, but you can't disprove it. Because if, I said that didn't happen because aliens aren't real, and you'd be like, yeah, but like they don't want you to know they're real, so they just, get out of there. They zap out of there. Maybe that's a tough one. I am more leaning towards UFO encounter than infrasound. The last one is Yeti, which, come on, probably. It was probably Yeti. I mean, Yeti, nah. There is a fun picture that they took during their journey where they said that they saw a Yeti. And, I mean, case closed, am I right? The initial investigation concludes in May of 1959 with the official report stating that the hikers died as a result of, quote, a compelling natural force that the hikers were unable to overcome, end quote. A statement as ambiguous as the circumstances of the incident itself. A compelling natural force. A compelling unnatural force. Like, you look at the bodies and that's already scary enough. But it's also that the chain of events, the positions, why are y'all away from the tent? Why did y'all leave the tent? Why did you rip open the tent? Why did you leave the tent? And what took you so long to come back to the tent? My biggest thing with this is what was wrong at the campsite that kept them from returning until their final moments, those three that crawled back. What compelled them to stay away? I'm gonna read you. It's from dyatlovpass.com. Now, if you want to dive more into this, there is a huge rabbit hole. This is where you can see diagrams, information, and photos. Please, viewer discretion is advised if you go to that website, please, because there are some photos that I wish I never looked at. So here's the conclusion with the tent. One of them writes, they left without their outer clothes, hats, gloves, and shoes. Only exceptionally serious threat might have motivated a group of 9 young and physically fit people to urgently leave their only source of shelter and warmth in the winter evening in a completely uninhabited forest of frozen snow and death. Why? Here's the question. It's either retreat down the slope to the tree line or the immediate and imminent death at the camp. Like there had to be something wrong at the camp that caused them to say, hey, we gotta go. Leave your stuff, the clothes, the gear, the food, the shoes, the knives. Those aren't important right now. The only important thing is we need to go. And they left. What's crazy is that, and it says it here, that it's not like the group was completely unarmed. They had axes and knives and, yeah, they were kitted up, dude. Like if they came across a bear, I mean, maybe not a bear, maybe, I'm sure 9 of them could take a bear, but, wolves, anything like that, which they weren't expected to see and they never did, they were ready to put up a fight. So whatever compelled them to rip open the inside of their tent and leave had to be something just unexplainable. They had to. When I read this, I don't think they had a choice. I think the only option they had was to leave. And which, again, my question is, why didn't they come back? Unfortunately, we'll never know. And I don't like that. Anyways, my beautiful people, thank you so much for watching the first installment of Chris versus the Unknown. Kind of threw this one together. I wanted to just kind of put something out there for you guys, and hopefully you like it. I'd love to do more. I have a couple more scripts that I want to read through and discuss with you guys. Please, please, please let me know what you think happened that night, your theories. And if I missed some important information, which I know I did, there is so much more to the story that if I went over everything, this would be a 10-hour video. But we're not going to do that. Maybe we'll do a part 2 diving into more details if you guys enjoy this. But anyways, big smooches from me to you. Thank you so much for watching Chris versus the Unknown, and we'll catch you in the next video. Good night.